Right. Oh, good. Okay, I'm calling to order the July 3rd Ad Hoc Advisory Districting Committee meeting. Everyone, thank you for coming. I think you have the agenda, but before we start, if you would like to sign in, the city staff would like to encourage you to, so that we can reach you for future updates. So if you haven't signed in, and if you'd like to, please go ahead. All right. Okay, roll call. Committee member Estrada? Here. Committee member Ricosa?
Here.
And committee member Ikezi is present. Okay, so let's move on to public presentations. Would any member of the public like to speak on any matter that is not on the agenda today? Okay, moving to next step. Okay, so let's move on to item number 3, which is review of court order received on June 26, 2018, and legal requirements.
Thank you, Chair Ikezi and committee members. I'd like to thank you very much for coming back and chairing these and presiding over these meetings. These meetings are public meetings which are as a result of an order of the Superior Court in a case in which the city is being sued under the California Voting Rights Act. And so I'll simply review the provisions of the order so people know why we're having these hearings. On June 26th, the city received a court order regarding its current election system that requires the city to take the following actions. Although there was a written court order on the 26th, we had a what's called a case management conference on July 2nd. So the original dates in the order that was published on the city's webpage have now been modified by the court. So I'm going to be giving you updated information. So this is information that's different than was originally published by the city under the original order. So we have an additional instructions from the court, which have not, to my knowledge, been incorporated by the court in a written order, a formal written order, but they were orally given to us yesterday in court. So we're still having 2 public hearings before July 9th. However, technically speaking, we need to have 2 public hearings before July 6th. On July 6th, both the plaintiffs who are suing the city and the city are required to serve and file proposed maps showing districts. And then the original order was that between July 11th and July 22nd, we hold 2 additional public hearings. However, the court has now changed the original trial date from July 23rd to July 18th. So we can't really have the second hearing after the beginning of the trial. So we may only have 1 additional meeting past this week on July 11th. We may try to have an additional meeting after that. I don't know if we'll be able to, but we'll let you know if there will be an additional meeting after the 11th. But right now, our plan is to have meetings today, Thursday, and then again on July 11th. So on June 26th, in response to the original court order, the city council gave the city manager authority to convene a committee, and that is the original districting committee that was used to come up with the 2 districts in Measure A, and to hold the 4 public hearings, and authority to take actions as required by the court order to meet the deadlines. And the 3 members of the original ad hoc districting committee have graciously and generously agreed to provide their time to have these hearings. So we're very, very grateful to them as fellow residents of Santa Clara for doing this. So the role of the committee is to hold the required hearings. I'm not going to say there'll be necessarily 4, but we'll have at least 3, we hope. And to listen and consider all the input received from the public, to review the demographer's recommendation. This is our demographer, Dr. Gobelay. And to provide a recommendation on a draft map and the sequence of elections. Now, since the city is required to at this point, submit a map on Friday. I think we'll want to be able to have some kind of recommendation about a map and the sequence of elections, I guess Thursday evening after that meeting. I'm doing the best I can. This is all stuff that's being ordered to the city on the fly. Okay, so these are the meetings. Again, I don't think there'll be a meeting on July 21st. And then we'll keep you informed as to whether there'll be a meeting between July 11th and July 18th when the trial is set to begin. The court order did not specify the number of districts. We're going to request public input on the boundaries of 6 districts, with the mayor, police chief, and city clerk continuing to be elected at large. In other words, we're not looking at having a 7-district map. We're looking at having a 6-district map. And again, these are the parameters that we used in the original districting process. Districts must be nearly equal in population. They need to comply with the provisions of the Federal Voting Rights Act and the Equal Protection Clause of the United States Constitution. And in establishing the boundaries of the districts, the council or this committee and the public may consider the following factors: topography, geography, cohesiveness, contiguity, integrity, and compactness of the territory and community of interest of the districts. This is the statutory criteria. We're probably not going to make these criteria within this time frame. The court is aware of that, but they've asked us to do this anyway. Okay, so that's my presentation on the legal background. Does the committee have any questions?
Mr. Ricosa. What?
Yes, we have someone taking minutes, as well as it's being recorded on our Government Access Channel 15, as well as on the city's Facebook and YouTube channels. Correct, and then it will be archived on the city's website.
Okay, committee member Ricosa.
Thank you. 2 things. So then are we going to request of the public to agree to 6 districts and not engage in discussions of other numbers of districts?
They're free to provide whatever comments they like. We have, I think, published several versions of a 6-district map in case people want to comment on that. And then if people want to have comments on other numbers of districts, they can provide those comments.
Okay, and the second question is the sequencing of elections. In the prior case, it was very easy. There were 2 districts. So has thought been given, or is there input can be taken from the public on this?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I have a question. So what exactly did the court order us to do?
They ordered us to kind of simulate somewhat the process in the statute of having 4 hearings, but they recognize that the court recognizes that there's a very compact timeline. So we're doing the best we can to, in the order it says, the city shall make best efforts to achieve these goals in terms of receiving public input on these maps. The court, it appears, is intending on handing down a map sometime after the remedies phase of the trial is over. And I think the court was interested in receiving some level of public input on which map, where the line should be for example, a 6-district map.
So what I'm hearing is that all we're required to do is hold 4 hearings. We're not required to do anything specific about number of districts, or is that true, or?
It was specifically to come up with districts It appears, I can just simply let you know, the court has not ruled on what the remedy should be.
Oh, I see.
So, but it appears that the court is leaning toward a 6-district solution. You know, I must candidly admit, this is a very, very different kind of legal proceeding than I have ever seen. So I'm not really sure exactly what we're doing here, but I'm doing the best to comply with the court order, since the court is ordering the city to accomplish these goals.
With the goal being holding hearings.
Holding hearings and come up with some kind of recommendation on a map to the court. In other words, the court wants us to submit a map on Friday that contains both districts as well as sequencing of the election.
Okay.
So I think that in terms of what the public can provide, that's what the court is asking for the city to hand in on Friday. So recognizing that we have tonight and Thursday evening to provide input back to the court on these 2 questions, that's what we're asking the public to do.
And how many? No, thank you. Thank you for coming. I'm sorry. So how many proposals are we expected to submit? If we get like 20 proposals, and if we don't manage to whittle it down, are we going to provide 20 proposals to the court, or?
I don't know how useful 20 proposals would be, but the court is requiring us to submit a map, at least one map, on Friday.
And so perhaps on Thursday, when we convene again, we would be looking at any proposals and then try to pick one? Is that like what the expectation is?
I guess my best advice would be to hear what the public has to say, see if you can determine at least which map would be the public that attended appeared to have preferred, and the sequencing that the public appeared to have preferred, and perhaps you could submit more than one map with some kind of information about how the public felt about each one.
Okay, thank you. And we're working with very compressed time, but of course we need to make sure that any proposal meet the federal guidelines, et cetera. So is Dr. Gobale going to be able to screen those
yes,
proposals?
I would not submit a proposal that would be in violation of the law. I mean, so I think that we would have to at least make sure that they were screened by Dr. Gobale as at least being in compliance with the basic laws regarding population and
before the Thursday meeting.
I would say by the end of the Thursday meeting.
And this evening, we do have drafts of 3 maps for the public to review. We knew we were on a short timeline, so we wanted to just ensure we got a little bit ahead of the game here. And then Dr. Gobale also considered the public input that was received in the past to inform these 3 maps. So when we go through her presentation, you'll see that.
Okay, so I guess the 3 things, at least the minimum of 3 things, there are minimum of 3 things that I'd like to know with each proposal, which is number 1, does it meet the federal guideline? Number 2, what is the distribution of the the makeup of the different ethnic groups? And number 3, which council member falls in member's home falls into which district? So I'd like to at least know those 3 things with any proposal. Okay, that's all the questions I have now. Did Committee Member Estrada have a question?
Not at this time.
Oh, okay, thank you. Committee Member Ricosa.
So just to clarify, if I understand Mr. Doyle, then the court has the ultimate authority to draw any lines they wish with any number of districts. They're the ultimate arbiter of this, and what we're giving them is our best effort as to what we recommend, but they're under no obligation to follow our recommendation.
That is what the court believes, I believe.
Okay. And I don't know if it's been thought about yet, but for council members who will continue beyond 2018, will they be allowed to fulfill their terms even though they won't be in the new districts?
The court has not decided that. I think that, just my understanding of the law, I think that would be problematic to make them leave office in the middle of a term.
I mean, there are elected officials. I mean, we elected them.
That's my belief, that's my opinion as well, that it would be problematic for them to not be able to finish their terms. So the court has not so ruled.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Okay, Committee Member Estrada.
Okay. I just wanted to ask you, in the last meetings, we made this decision after we closed the public hearing, and then we went into the next session and made that decision. Will that be the only, since there's only 3 of us and the Brown Act applies and all that, we can't have any kind of discussions between us until we are on record again and have to make that decision with these variety parameters, and we will do that on Thursday?
I think that would be good.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so are we ready to move on to the next item? Okay, all right. So the next item on the agenda is public hearing to receive input and form a recommendation on district boundaries and election sequencing for council consideration and response to court order. First up is Dr. Gourbalet on the professional demographic opinion.
Is this microphone on? Yes, obviously. Hello.
Oh, okay. Excuse me, Dr. Gourbalet. Okay, so we are going, according to the agenda, we're going to have a presentation by Dr. Gourbalet, and what are we talking about? What's the question?
I don't know what his question is. I don't know what he's talking about.
Okay, the question is, according to this sheet, which is the council districting process sheet, it says one council, oh wait, what does it say? If the court orders district elections, the voters will only be able to elect one council member who lives in the same district as those voters. Is this still true, applicable to what we're working on today?
That appears to be the court's intention.
Okay, thank you. Did that answer your question, sir? Oh.
I said it appears to be the court's intention to do that. Yes.
Okay, all right. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Gourbalet, but this is a pretty casual setting.
All right. I'm going to go through the first part of the agenda fairly clearly, fairly quickly, emphasizing what I think are the most important things to know, bearing in mind that some of you were not here for the last sets of hearings and may not have heard some of this material before. On my agenda for this next piece of the meeting is for me to review the districting criteria that we demographers use and the kind of data that we use when districting, and tell you a little bit about how we do it, what the mechanics of it are, And then I have a couple of background maps that give a context for the 3 draft plans that I've put together in the last week since being asked to do so. These background maps, these draft plans are just what I've called them. They're drafts, and they could be modified, and given more time, we could do extensive modifications. But I'd like you to consider what I will have to say about what I took into account when drawing the boundaries to see if that makes sense to you or if there's something obvious that I should have considered and didn't. And then, of course, there will be time for questions. One of the very most important things to keep in mind is that we have to make the 6 council districts equal in total population, starting with Census 2010 data. The state elections code benchmarks that as the database to use when designing districts. And so we know there has been population growth unevenly throughout the city since 2010, and we've also provided some estimates of what changes there have been in the different parts of the city, so we can take that into account to some extent in drawing the new districts. Brian has also already mentioned some of the provisions that I have in my presentation, and I'll talk about a few other criteria. All right, as I said, Census 2010 population need to be used because they're the only population counts, absolute counts, legal counts that we have now, even in halfway through 2018. The next set of official legal counts for districting purposes will be released after Census 2010 at the beginning of 2020, after they're released at the beginning of 2021. And at that point, any plan that the court orders that the city implement will need to be re-examined in terms of the 2020 population counts, the new population counts, in order to assure that the populations are balanced, that is, fairly equal. This goes to the very core of the districting legal system. That is, they need to be equal in total population. And there can be no more than a 10% total deviation. This means that the difference between the most and least election districts, that is the absolute value, the difference between most and the least, the absolute value around the ideal population, cannot exceed 10% of the ideal district size. Well, in 2010, the city's population was 116,468, and each of 6 council districts would need to have 1/6 that total, about 19,411. 10% of this, that would be the deviation, the permitted difference between the most and least populous council districts in any plan, would be 1,941. So the total deviation should not exceed that figure. This is called the total deviation, and that's a percent expressed as a percentage usually, and the percentage can't exceed 10%. So the total deviation should not exceed 10% of the ideal district size. The post-2010 housing growth in the city has been uneven. We have gotten data from the city on the housing units built from 2010 through sometime in 2017, and we applied multipliers derived from state formulas to estimate the numbers of persons per household for each kind of housing unit. Single-family units usually have more people living in them than multifamily units, like apartments, for example. So we have estimated population growth from post-2010 housing. However, please keep in mind that population changes occur in ways that are not particularly related to housing growth. So we cannot take into account all of the population shifts. We do not in this country require people to report where they live and how many people are in their household and when they move and so forth. We are free to keep this information private until we have our decennial censuses. So we cannot know for sure what the real population counts are today out there in the community, in small areas of the community. There are estimates available from the state and federal governments of the city's total population, but the estimates for sub-areas of the city have large error margins, lots of uncertainty associated with those. So we can, to some extent, try to make it less necessary to revise council district boundaries in substantial ways after 2020 census data by making the pieces of the city with the most population growth that we know of from new housing to have smaller populations than the districts and parts of the city with less housing growth. And I'll illustrate this as we go on. The Federal Voting Rights Act, and that's the act which the California Voting Rights Act refers to in some of its provisions, requires that members of certain protected groups be given the opportunity to elect representatives of their choice or influence the election of representatives of their choice. There are a couple of Supreme Court decisions which I've cited here, which I won't read to you on the subject in case you should care to pursue them. Brian already mentioned these traditional districting criteria, which are also in the California Elections Code: topography, geography, cohesiveness, continuity, integrity, compactness of territory, communities of interest, including geographic communities like neighborhoods, and socioeconomic groups, including groups protected under the Federal Voting Rights Act. And when we draw election district boundaries, we try to use identifiable features as boundaries, like major thoroughfares and sometimes creeks or railroads. So we try to make those understandable to people so that if they want to think about, I live in the 2nd Council District, here are boundaries, and they can be recognizable to you. They're not down back property lines, and this is because census data don't come that way. We have census blocks, the building blocks for election districts, which are streets, not back property lines. So there are a lot of little details here that you need to take into account when you think about what boundaries there could be. The courts have also emphasized taking into account things like voting precincts, and we have looked at voting precincts, the latest voting precincts in the county, from the county, in order to try to follow those boundaries to the extent possible. We use census blocks, city blocks as the building blocks. We can the courts have said it's legal to try to avoid head-to-head contests between incumbents, all else being equal. And it was already asked that we report on where the incumbents live. Chairperson Zeki required that, and I already did it for the 3 plans. So we can see what the distribution of the 6 current incumbents was a little later in the presentation, and any other criteria that may address unique local concerns, and that's kind of vague. So if you think there are unique things about the city, among the many unique things, there may be things that affect districting that the court might take into account when deciding what kind of plan to order for the city. Now, the technology of drawing districts is to use geographic information systems technology, computer mapping technology, the same technology that Google Maps and Waze and any other kinds of GPS equipment utilizes. We use a number of layers. You can imagine a base map of the city with different layers. One layer the streets, another layer the creeks, another layer the railroads, another layer the election precincts, another layer the neighborhoods. We use these all on top of each other when drawing boundaries. And so that's what's listed here. We also did look at Santa Clara Unified School District attendance area boundaries in the last round of drawing the 2 council district plan, but that probably is not very practical to use at this point. And we did this time use the next door neighborhood map, which is as close as we can get to approximating the city's neighborhood boundaries. And they may or may not be what you think of as being the proper neighborhood boundaries, but they're the only GIS boundaries that we have to represent neighborhoods. Sorry, thank you. This table summarizes the data for the whole city that we use in districting. And I don't really think I need to go through this for you, except to mention what the variables are, what the labels say. The first set of rows in the table show the 2010 census population, the total population, the non-Hispanic Asian population, non-Hispanic white, Hispanic origin, non-Hispanic Black, non-Hispanic Native American Alaska Native, non-Hispanic Hawaiian Pacific Islander, non-Hispanic other, and non-Hispanic other mixed race, which are the Census Bureau's categories to classify people into race ethnic categories that are used to measure the numbers and shares of members of groups protected under the Federal Voting Rights Act. And the numbers you see here in the percentages are what Census 2010 showed to be the distribution of the total population counted in 2010 in these various race ethnic groups. You'll notice that the 3 largest race ethnic groups in the city are Asians, first of all, 39% of the city's population in 2010, non-Hispanic whites, 36%, Hispanics, 19%, and then the other groups are much smaller, have much smaller percentages of the population, and we combine them in the data for the tables for each of the plans. Then the second bank of rows in this table are estimates made by the Census Bureau based on its American Community Survey conducted from 2012 to 2016, all the data collected in that 5-year period to estimate the population of people who are eligible to vote, citizen voting age populations for the various race ethnic groups, particularly those protected under the Federal Voting Rights Act. So here we have an estimated total CVAP for that 5-year period of 66,036, which is what we get when we sum the census block estimates for the city. And the census blocks, as it says in the footnote for the slide you're looking at, are the smallest unit of census geography, the smallest piece of territory for which population counts are available. We aggregate blocks to create bigger building blocks for districting plans, and we call these bigger building blocks pieces. And we use those to develop draft districting plans. Anyhow, this 66,036 is the total from the block level estimates by the Census Bureau, but the Census Bureau also provides an estimate for the whole city, which is a different number, and I am unable to reconcile the differences except so far to perhaps attribute them to the huge error margins associated with estimated citizens voting age population for tiny units of geography, but there may be other explanations, and I'm continuing to look at that. But we do need to use the census block data. We don't have any alternative in order to measure citizen voting age populations in any draft plan. This map shows the Census 2010 distribution of the city's population, total population, of all ages and citizenships, by census block. And you can see the city has a lot of census blocks, almost 1,900 of them. This PowerPoint is posted or will be posted on the city's website. And you can zoom in on the maps and data tables online to read them better. I know you can't really see this from where you're sitting. I can barely see it here on my computer in front of me. Yes?
Pie charts that are all over indicate colors for different demographics, but it's really hard to see what.
I know.
Is that the three colors that were in your previous slide of the major populations of voters?
What the pie charts are on this map are, first of all, they're in proportion to the total population of that block. And you'll see some of the census blocks have really large populations and some of them have tiny ones. The colors of the pieces of the pie show the race ethnicity as counted in 2010. And the aqua blue color, the lighter blue color, is non-Hispanic Asian. Green is non-Hispanic white. Blue, the darker blue, is Hispanic origin. Red is non-Hispanic African American. And the yellow is all of the other groups combined. This map shows the estimated citizen voting age population, the eligible voter population. And I should have said before that the citizen voting age population is used to measure whether a plan meets, or the extent to which a districting plan meets, Federal Voting Rights Act requirements. This is the measure that has been adopted for use by courts. So the reason that I'm reporting this is Federal Voting Rights Act purposes. This is the kind of data we must use now for that particular purpose, identifying Federal Voting Rights Act compliance. And the pies are proportional to the number, the estimated number of citizen voting age people in each census block, and the colors of the pieces of the pie are the same as used in the previous map. Again, you can zoom in on areas of interest if you look at this on your computer. Now, just as background, I was asked to show the two-district plan that was developed earlier this year and recommended to the City Council and then shown to the voters and defeated along with Measure A. The thing that's interesting to note about this map, I think at this point, is the boundary between the north and the south, Districts 1 and 2, which mostly followed El Camino Real. So that east-west line is El Camino Real. And then in the west, it goes southward, and that's Lawrence Expressway. So the two-district map used Lawrence Expressway and El Camino Real as the boundary. And I used this boundary in all the three draft maps just because there were lots of arguments for using it back then, earlier this year. All right, draft plans 1, 2, and 3. Each plan has 6 council districts with relatively equal total populations, with deviations under 10% using Census 2010 data. All 3 plans use this north-south plan, two-district plan boundary, as I already said. And boundaries are major thoroughfares when possible. In all 3 plans, districts 2, 3, and 4 have the smallest populations to take into account the fact that more housing growth happened since 2010 there than in any of the other council districts. So we've kept those districts small so as to reduce the need for boundary realignment after Census 2020. This is draft plan 1. District 1 is the farthest north plan, and, sorry, I should have. I brought my printed map up here so I can read the street names, which I still can't read right now. And I think if you want to know what the boundaries are, I'm going to have to go to my PDF file. I think it's Beppe Montague Expressway. Yeah, okay, Highway 101 Montague Expressway. And then next we have District 2. Notice that District 2 is geographically huge, but that's because, as you saw a couple of slides ago, there's really very little population in that whole part of the city. See where the pies are missing on this? So the northern district or districts need to be geographically larger than other ones because the population density is lower.
But you have taken into account the growth that's happening in that area?
Not at this point, no. These maps are all based initially on Census 2010 population count, since that's what we're required to use to measure planned deviation. Later on, I will tell you what these maps translate into. In fact, in the next slide, the deviation of this particular plan, when we take into account our estimate of population growth through new housing, is 11.2%, whereas using 2010 census data, the deviation is 7.5%.
But the city does know its estimated growth in that area due to permits and for the condos and apartments and such that are being built.
Completed final permits, not the pulled permits, but the completed permits, because we can't count future populations. We have to estimate how many people are already there, not who might live there once it's finished. So our estimates do not take into account all of the population growth through new housing since 2010, but this is the best we can do for you. There are no ways that we know of doing it short of taking another census. And I think we have to wait for those data, unfortunately. So the plan configuration here continues with Council District 3, and this is a railroad right here, and this Kylie, thank you, and this is El Camino Real and Lawrence Expressway. So here's El Camino Real, which forms the southern boundary of District 2 as well. Then District 4 includes the area north of, and I'm sorry, I ought to know what this street is, but Homestead, yes. And then this particular boundary, I'm sorry, Scott, yes. And this Saratoga Avenue, and this little piece is San Tomas, yes. Thank you. San Tomas is this line here. So I hope that you can understand this map. And it was drawn using pieces that we developed. And somehow I don't see the pieces in this presentation. Oh, okay. I put them in the wrong place. All right. This pieces map on slide 21 shows you the building blocks we used, and there are 36 pieces. There were 31 in the 2-district plan drawing process, and we've subdivided some of them in order to make more nuanced districts with population balance this time. Some of the pieces we used as building blocks are geographically huge with small populations, and others are geographically huge with, geographically small with large populations. And we don't have to make these building blocks equal in population. Around the perimeter of the city, there's really no way to divide some areas. So we know that really has to be together in one piece of the city, in one council district, most likely. All right. Draft Plan 2 is the same as 1, except we have a different boundary between districts 1 and 2, a different treatment of the north. The same elsewhere. So if I flip back 2, you can see the boundary between districts 1 and 2 here. And during the 2-district plan drawing process, people didn't like that boundary both between 1 and 2 because it divided an Asian community, divided Asian populations into 2 council districts. But the Asian and total population in that part of the city, that northeastern part of the city, is too large to be in a single council district, and we need to divide it in some way. So using a major thoroughfare in Plan 1 shows one kind of a boundary, and in Plan 2, we have a different division of the north. And you might consider which sort of a division of the north might make more sense. And remember, we have to divide the north because we have to observe the maximum 10% deviation between most of these populous council districts. And then Draft Plan 2's total deviation using Census 2010 data, 8.8%. And the deviation when taking into account the estimated post-2010 housing population growth from new housing, 12.5%. Now, you may be wondering how much we can do with these estimates for post-2010 population growth from new housing, keeping in mind that we have incomplete data on population shifts. It occurs to me that the city probably not want to consider having additional litigation on the subject of deviation of an adopted plan or a court-ordered plan being above 10%. But there is an argument in my mind for saying that this late in the decade, there's a good reason to try to take population growth since the last census into account. So this might be one of the circumstances where the deviation could be maybe a little bit above 10% in order to adjust for what we know has happened already in the city since the last census. But this is really a legal question. So I'm just observing this as a demographer, that the difference between 8.8% and 12.5% may not matter a huge lot in this case. But what do I know? What will the court say about this? What would they say about this? I hope they never say anything. So, Draft Plan 3. This one is different from the first 2 in that it's based on the next door neighborhood boundaries to the extent possible. Sometimes we drew lines that are based on neighborhood boundaries in order to keep neighborhoods intact, at least what next door says the neighborhoods are intact. And sometimes we had to split the next door neighborhood boundaries, but we still, in most cases, tried to use major thoroughfares. Right down the middle of a major road is a good place in most cases to draw a boundary line. In the last round of discussions of where to draw lines, the question of Koreatown was brought up, and I wanted to mention it now in case it's still in anyone's mind. Koreatown, as I understand it, is along this western part of El Camino Real, on both sides of the street. We looked at where the Korean population places of residence were, or what the distribution was in 2010, and did not find a Korean population concentration in that part of the city along this boundary between districts 3 and 4 in this map. What instead I understand Koreatown may be is where many Korean businesses are located. So in case anyone wants to think about keeping Koreatown together, I just wanted to point that out. And there's one other thing that's important about this matter is that we need to use census block geography. And the census blocks, especially on the south side of El Camino Real in this area, some of them are huge and jagged, and we can't split them. So the boundary, if we use census blocks, would look like this along block boundaries, and those would not be terribly recognizable. So in case you want to consider talking about Koreatown needing to be in a single council district, that's something I wanted to mention as a small detail. So this draft plan 3 has the same district 1 and 2 boundary as draft plan 1, but we could substitute the draft plan 2 boundary for districts 1 and 2 in this map. We could do that. So we could use this boundary between 1 and 2 in draft plan 3. So we could switch that out if we needed to. In any event, this is the third draft plan. Its deviation is also 8.8% using 2010 population counts, and we estimate it to be 12% when we take into account our estimate of post-2010 population growth from new housing. And I already talked about pieces. Now, I have wonderful news for you. Just today, I managed to finish a tool that is already or soon will be already on the city's website that you can use to move pieces around from one council district to another if you want to experiment with drawing different boundaries. And this is a new improved version of what we did before. It has more automatic calculations in it. And the map, the pieces map that you need to use along with the calculator is on a worksheet, the second worksheet of that Excel file that's on the city's website. So you have the pieces map along with the data and the automatic calculator if you like to make jigsaw puzzles. Before I started doing redistricting work, I liked to do jigsaw puzzles. And now I don't need to do that anymore. Also on the city's website, separately posted, is the pieces map. And if you want to do it with your pocket calculator, the data that's on the first worksheet of the Excel file is what you would use. And I want to, before I take comments or questions, move now to the Excel file so you can see for yourself what it looks like. This is the Excel file, a calculator file. Now, at the top in red it says, do not touch anything except the yellow shaded cells down here, the bottom left part, which is the district assignment for each of the 36 pieces. These are pieces numbers 1 through 36 with all the data off to the right, all the data fields off to the right. So if you want to use the pieces map together with data, here's where you get the data. You don't want to fiddle around with this calculator, but I think this calculator is really humdinger, much easier to use and much more informative than what we had before. So if you want to really do a good job of using this, I've pointed out that the second worksheet is the pieces map. It's just a picture pasted in there. And then there are instructions in case you read instructions. And I know most people don't like to, but it might help you avoid some frustration in this case. Tried to keep it succinct. And then the fourth worksheet is a description of each of the fields used in the database. So you can see in long form an explanation of what each piece of the data is, what each thing is. At the bottom, the far right in the first worksheet, you find the district assignments in draft plans 1, 2, and 3. In the calculator file, the district assignments that are plugged in here are for the draft plan 1. But you can change this as you wish. And as soon as you change a district assignment for one of the pieces, now I'm going to change the district assignment for piece number 1. You can see that the numbers up here change because there's an automatic calculation. So I'm going to change the assignment there to District 6. Did it change? Yeah, and here's another one. I'm changing the next one to 6. Yeah, you can see District 1 changing there. So this happens automatically, and all the numbers off to the right change too. So if you would like to play with district making over your 4th of July holiday, and you think you have a really great plan that would work, that you'd like to be shared with the public Thursday evening, please email it to the city, to Jennifer and Nadine tomorrow, so that I can work on it to be sure that I understand your plan and can describe it. Because I can't do that on the fly. I really have to concentrate. So I know this time frame is ridiculously short, but it is what we have. So back to the PowerPoint. In the additional slides at the back, here are the assignments for district draft plans 1, 2, and 3 for each of the incumbents. And I've also put down the piece number each of the incumbents lives in here. And you'll notice that in draft plan 1, we have 3 incumbents living in District 5, 1 in District 1, 1 in District 3, 1 in District 6. Draft plan 2 is the same, except for Vice Mayor Watanabe is in District 1 in draft plan 1, District 2 in draft plan 2. And then in draft plan 3, we have 1 incumbent in District 1, none in District 2, 1 in District 3, 1 in District 4, 1 in District 5, and 2 in District 6. So draft plan 3 distributes the incumbents more evenly. But keep in mind that the mayor would be elected at large, so Mayor Gilmore would not actually run for election as a District 6 council member, but rather as mayor if she plans to run and wants to run as mayor again. So also in these additional slides, I have 2 more maps. This one shows where the population growth from new housing was in draft plan 1. And you notice again, I showed you this map before, a large share of it's in districts 3 and 4. And then this is draft plan 3 showing the estimated population growth from post-2010 housing along with the next door neighborhoods, which are color shaded. And I don't think these last slides are on the city's website now, but that will happen. So now I think I've finished with what I plan to say, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, Dr. Gobele, thank you very much for the great work. And this is a great innovation. We don't have to worry about calculating each proposal anymore. And it's much more streamlined and automatic. So thank you very much. Yes.
I'm sorry, I forgot one thing. The pieces may not be as fine graded as you'd like. If you'd like to see a piece boundary moved over here or there, I probably cannot do that for you in time for Thursday's meeting. but oftentimes minor adjustments in boundaries don't have very big population movements associated with them.
Okay, thank you for that too. Okay, so let's see, let me look at the agenda again. Okay, excuse me. Okay, so now it's time for public input, and each speaker has 3 minutes to speak. And I, as a chair, will direct the audience's, the public's question to the staff or us or anybody else who is there. So if you would like to fill out the, I understand, but I'm trying to explain the procedure, so let's do this step by step. Are you Mr. Bernsteves? Oh, you're Mr. Bernsteves. And so if you'd like to speak, I'd like to encourage you to try to fill out the speaker card if you'd like to. Okay, so Mr. Bernsteves. Oh, and
He had questions for the demographer.
I understand, but I will be addressing each of the questions and the public's comment to different members of the public. So please fill out the card, and I will call out the members of the audience in order.
Mary Kesey, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I'd like our city clerk to make a comment.
So if there are comments from the community, then you can include that with your public testimony so that we can capture it correctly. And then again, if you do fill out a speaker card, then we can always respond to you in writing if it's needed so that we're in compliance with the Brown Act.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. Yes, Dr. Gobale.
If there are demographic-related questions as we go along, I'd be happy to answer them if that would fit in with the agenda as it needs to be followed.
Okay, maybe I didn't make myself clear. So I would like to call out each member of the public. Whenever you're called, please go up to the podium and make your comment or ask questions. If there are specific questions for members of the people who are here, then I will direct those questions to the staff or Dr. Gobale or our city attorney. In that way, we will be able to capture all the comments and questions and the answers in an orderly manner with the video. Okay, so the first speaker is Bernsteves. Please go up to the podium and yes, please.
Good evening, everyone. Before I start, just about the procedure.
Oh, and each person has 3 minutes to speak.
Yes, I know. And so to make sense of that, could I complete my comments within 3 minutes? I'd appreciate it if you could give me notice after 2 minutes so for the final minute. And then you said you wanted to allocate questions to the respective specialists. It might be useful if I just run through my 3 minutes and then you allocate the questions after that instead of breaking the presentation.
Yes, I will make sure that you will not get interrupted during those 3 minutes.
I'm
Thank
sorry,
you.
Chair.
If that's
So
acceptable to you.
I will go and use the timer, although you won't be able to see the back here. The lights on the podium here, when it's green, then you have time. When it's, I think it's 60 seconds, then it turns yellow, and then 30 goes to red.
Okay, thank you.
I'll
Green,
confirm
yellow,
that
red.
after we do the first one. It might be 30-10.
All right, let's see how it goes. And our objective is to solicit your input, so we don't want to, be draconian, but, we want to keep things in order. All right, thank you.
All right, so I have a couple of questions and comments here. First of all, one word I didn't hear in a long presentation here is the word citizen. And that bugs me because a few years ago I was not a citizen, I was not entitled to vote in this country, and not being entitled to vote, I didn't vote here. Now, we've heard an awful lot about the census, 2010 census and so on, population figures, population growth, housing growth, extrapolation and so on. But what we haven't heard very much about is the actual numbers of voters in this. Now, Ms. Gobale did mention the abbreviation I think CVAP, people who are actually registered voters. It seems to me that applying the federal constitution and applying the constitution of the state of California, we need to focus on having districts, if that's what we're going to end up doing, and I'm not sure districts are even a good solution at all, but if we're going to do that, we have to have districts with an equal number of voters, eligible voters, whether or not they're in fact registered. Now, we of course have very good data from the registrar of voters here in Santa Clara County that tell you exactly who is registered to vote where. That leaves, of course, a little bit of a gap in terms of what do we do about people who are eligible to vote, but not in fact registered to vote, and how do we identify those? But I'm sure there are statistical approaches for approximating that, if that is even necessary. Perhaps one can simply go by voter registration. So I'm a little dubious about the idea that we have districts of equal population when most of those, or a significant part of the population, is not in fact eligible to vote. For example, when you look at Plan 1, we had one district with 9,707 voters and another district with 13,427 voters. In other words, the District 6 voters have their votes discounted by approximately 30%, not 10%, but 30%. That makes an absolute mockery of our democratic voting system in the state, and we should not tolerate that. And this is basically the draft of an appellate brief here. Further, Ms. Gobellet talked about protected groups under the Federal Voting Rights Act. Is that the 3 minutes up?
Please finish your sentence.
I'd like to know exactly what those groups are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's answer your questions. So does Dr. Gobellet have comments about whether it's appropriate to use a registered voter roll to make this district boundaries? And secondly, can you elaborate on the protected class?
On the data tables that I showed you in the PowerPoint, the protected groups are listed. All of the different population groups are protected except for non-Hispanic whites. So the only non-protected or unprotected groups under the Federal Voting Rights Act, as I believe the courts have interpreted it, are non-Hispanic whites. And we do have registered voter and voter turnout data in that Excel worksheet that I showed you. They are from Census 2010, which is a long time ago, and the 2010 general election. But that's the only year for which we have census block level counts of registered and actual voters. We do have precinct level information about registered and actual voters in November 2016 that are for precincts which are much bigger than census blocks. So there isn't any simple way to allocate them to districts. I can talk to you about that later. But the bottom line, though, basic question that you're raising is to the best of my understanding, the issue about what should be taken into account when designing election districts, what kinds of populations to take into account, is that the Supreme Court ruled as recently as 2016, I think, on this question. That's total population. So the total population must be balanced, regardless of what the age distribution and citizenship and registered and actual voter distribution is. And that case is, well, my understanding it is well, we can talk about this later, but my understanding is that as far as the courts are concerned, there's nothing been said to the contrary that we equalize total populations. We can take these other things into account and notice how different they are from each other. And that is noteworthy. But I suspect if we hang around another 50 years, the court still won't have resolved that issue fully.
And also the number of registered voters changes significantly. I think that depending on what's going on in the country or in our community and who's running, and so.
And voter turnout varies a lot by
Right,
election.
right. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. If you have other people have questions, please mention them when you have an opportunity to go up to the podium. Okay, the next speaker is Dianne Harrison.
Hi. By the way, another answer for the population, which we discussed at one of the other meetings, is that it's best to go by the population because children are turning 18 every day in families across the city, and a lot of people are being naturalized. So it's best to go by the population. I submitted a couple of plans, one of which was using wrong data, one of which was using the old pieces. So I want to use to refine it a little bit using the new pieces, but I'm not real good at searching the city database, so I'm wondering if you can give us an actual website address, or where we look. Is it under government? Is it under whatever, so that we can find, because I want to find this and I don't want to spend a lot of time looking for it. And that's really my only question. And if anyone's interested in my comment, it's under Jennifer Yamaguma's, that section of stuff. There's no page numbers, but it's about halfway through. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So can we ask the staff to post that Excel spreadsheet on the page where you had that big one-page notice on the schedule? Would that be possible?
Yes, it's there, but we'll make sure it's more clear.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. The next person is Nancy Biagini.
Hi. So I just have one small comment and a question through the chair. The comment was I'm a little perplexed about Plan 3 using the next door lines to determine how the boundaries are drawn. And the reason I say that is I don't really know how next door, what criteria they use to come up with their boundaries. So it seems a little loosey-goosey to base boundaries largely on next door's issues or next door's criteria. That said, here's my question. Oh, was there a comment?
Please refrain from interrupting the speaker on the podium. Okay, please continue.
Huh?
Okay, keep
continue. Okay, so through the chair, my question is, we all know there's going to be openings on the city council this November. And assuming, of course, that there's going to be a change on how Santa Clara conducts their elections, there's probably going to be a lot of districts. What's the process or criteria that's going to be used to determine where or what district those openings are going to be?
You're talking about the sequencing.
Well, I'm talking about like, okay, let's say there's 6 districts and it goes by Plan 2. I'm just pulling that out of thin air. And then there's a couple of openings in November. Are they going to come from the districts that those 2 council members came from, which I can understand based on the spread that may not be the case. So what process do you use to determine that, gee, there's 2 openings, so one will be in District 1 and one will be in District 6, or one will be in 3, one will be in 4. What process will be used to determine, especially for this November, where those, or what districts those seats will come from? Does that make sense?
Yes, I think I understand.
Okay.
I think it's about sequencing, which is one of the things that this committee is supposed to.
You have a tough job.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you. Do I have all your input? Do we have all your input? Okay, you're done. Thank you very much. Okay, all right, so any comments or questions on this speaker, what the speaker said? Okay, I'm sorry.
Chair?
Sorry, what Mr. Doyle may have a comment on.
Chair, I think this committee can recommend something with respect to the court, but the court will, it appears, believes it will make the decision
On the sequencing?
on the sequencing, yes.
Okay. And when we, just to be clear, when we talk about sequencing, what we're talking about is, let's say we're going to have six districts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, as Ms. Biagini said. Which of those six districts is going to be choosing the council member in 2018? And which ones are going to be choosing in 2020, et cetera? That's what we mean by sequencing. Okay, thank you. Let's see, and I guess Ms. Biagini also asked about the next door, the boundaries from next door. Where do they come from?
I'm not sure, but if, to the extent that they do represent people's ideas about their community of interest, literally their community in which they live, they might be useful. And I don't know if they come from real estate definitions or what. Does anyone here have a better idea than I do? Self-identified? So people are surveyed to ask what neighborhood do you live in, and they give an answer, that kind of self-identification? Okay.
Okay, so it's not completely arbitrary. People who, actual residents are actually surveyed is what I'm hearing. Okay, thank you. Okay, so hopefully that addresses Ms. Biagini's question. So let's move on to Rob Jerdonek.
Hi, my name is Rob Jordanek. I've been a resident of Santa Clara for 13 years. I live in the north side. I have reviewed the 3 maps prepared by the demographer. I think draft map number 2 should be eliminated. I'm looking at the numbers. It does not contain any district that is more than 50% of the Asian American citizen voting age population. And I think that is a requirement that the judge would be looking for in the CVRA lawsuit. Drafts maps number 1 and number 3 have potential. They both have a district that is 51% Asian American CVAP. And I live on the north side, and both of those maps, number 1 and number 3, do a pretty good job of defining the neighborhood boundaries on the north side. It's unfortunate that the Montague Park neighborhood would need to be separated from the rest of the north side. However, with the court demand for small districts, the line would need to be drawn somewhere. So Montague Expressway seems to be the right natural boundary for the north side. Since I do not live in the southern part of the city, I will leave feedback on those boundary lines to my other neighbors that are here today. Finally, drawing 6 districts alone would not solve the problem of minority representation on our city council. If multiple minority candidates run for office in a district, they could easily split the vote among each other, and the incumbent would still win. The typical solution for this problem would be runoff elections. However, we all know that runoff elections are expensive and turnout is typically low. These problems can be solved by requiring instant runoff voting, otherwise known as IRV. IRV is a form of ranked choice voting. It is used in San Francisco, Oakland, San Leandro, and many other cities across the country. The state of Maine even uses it for its primaries and its congressional elections. The court agreement language should clearly state that IRV should be used for all elected offices as soon as the election equipment is available. County election equipment will likely be able to support IRV by the year 2020. The city should not sign any court agreement without this language to enable IRV. And I do have one question for the committee. So you mentioned in 2020, so it's 2018 now, in 2020 there's going to be a new census, and they will be able to redraw the maps in 2021. So it sounds like the judge is going to hand us the district map here in 2018. And so what happens in 2021? Do we have to go back to the court and go through this again with the judge, and he's going to pick our new one in 2021, 2031, 2041? Or, I mean, or do we get to just change it all again in 2021 however we want to? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay. Oh, great questions. When we had the previous, when this committee convened previously, we reviewed the demography based on the assumption that we're going to have ranked choice. And we had like a specific minority CVAP percentage we wanted to achieve based on the assumption that we're going to do ranked choice voting, but that got nixed because Measure A didn't pass. So what's going to be the situation there? Because that has a direct link to Rob's question about are we targeting 50% minority in any of one of the districts? So if you could answer that question and then move on to what's going to happen when the census 2020 comes out.
There were several questions. The first question appears to be related to ranked choice voting. The court does not appear to be inclined to put that as part of its ruling. I can't speculate as to what the court's remedy will be, but it does not appear that that's something that the court will order. As far as what will happen in 2020, again, I have to say I don't know. I don't know what the court will rule. I don't know whether the court will rule that this will be, that these, whatever districts it comes up with will be in place only in 2018 and that something else will happen in 2020. I don't know whether this will be a permanent solution or whether the court will attempt to retain jurisdiction over elections in Santa Clara and somehow be involved in redistricting in 2021. We're dealing with a situation where the court has not ruled. All the court has done is issued a case management order. So we don't have a ruling from the court on what the remedy will be, just simply statements made at case management conference.
So what I'm hearing is that the court has can tell us to do ranked choice voting, but what you're seeing is that they're not likely to order us. But if they do order us to go to ranked choice, do we have to go to ranked choice now, regardless of what our charter says?
I'd rather not answer a hypothetical question.
Okay, all right. So then otherwise, the only way that our city will move to ranked choice voting is if we have another vote and change the charter.
And that could happen either by a ballot measure put on by the city council, or someone could bring an initiative to put a ballot measure for ranked choice voting.
Okay,
there are two ways of putting it, but that would be the way to amend the charter.
Okay, okay. I understand how this proceeds. Thank you.
Just as a reminder, the registrar of voters is not in a position to implement ranked choice voting yet. So
right.
It's just as a reminder from the last
earliest was 2020 is what
Correct.
We heard at the last committee.
It would not be possible to have ranked choice voting in 2018 under any circumstances.
Got it. Okay, so it's good to have that clarified. Thank you. All right, so given that ranked choice voting is not going to happen in 2018 and maybe not in 2020, are we aiming for 50% CVAP, Asian CVAP or Hispanic CVAP? Is that the goal now?
It appears to be the goal of the plaintiffs in the lawsuit.
Okay, all right. Okay, so the next question, what's going to happen to the ordering, the sequencing of the districts if we were to go to 6 districts after the 2020 census? I think things like this happen all the time with congressional districts where some congressperson is in, during some congressperson's term, his or her district map gets completely redrawn. So in a situation like that, maybe that's going to be analogous. How is a sequencing determined?
Sequencing is a different question than how congressional redistricting takes place. Congressional sequencing is all the same. Congress is elected every 2 years.
Oh, yeah, that's
So,
right.
yeah.
Wait. Oh, yeah, that's right. So Senate, no, Senate is, Senate
No,
is
and
two senators from each
sequencing is a
state.
different
So
question than
I guess
redistricting.
maybe it's not going to be applicable in our situation. So what's going to happen to our sequencing if 2020 census data comes out drastically different and we need to completely redraw the districting? What's going to happen to sequencing?
Well, it will depend on what the court's order is. And I don't know what the order will be. When we were talking about the two-district rule, we were talking about amending the charter to, if the district line changed and you wanted to still run from that district, you would have to move to the new district, assuming you could serve out your term if the district line changed, but if you wanted to run from the same district and the district moved out from under you, you'd have to move to the old district. Otherwise, you could run from the same district. In other words,
Commissioner Member, reclose up.
Congressional districting has nothing to do with the city of Santa Clara.
No, I'm not talking about congressional
So
districts. I'm
I
talking
made it
about.
clear
So that should not be an issue.
No, I made it clear that my question was not applicable.
Okay, so let's move.
No, we're not talking about congressional district. We're talking about these districts, and the answer is, the simple answer is, I don't know, because the court hasn't issued any order.
So let's say that a person gets chosen from one district in 2018, and that person's district has to get split up into two after 2020 census. And if that person happens to fall, that person will be able to serve out his or her term through 2022? That's usually how things happen. Okay,
That is usually how it happens.
Okay.
So just a suggestion, the city of San Jose has had this for many years, so we can look to them to see how they handle it.
Oh, yeah, great idea. Can somebody find out what happened, how San Jose does it so that we can understand how it's handled?
Well, I mean, as we discussed the last time, it's a good idea to have, draw the district lines in a way where they're probably not going to change too much between the census, between the various 10-year censuses. Now, the one difference between San Jose and Santa Clara is our districts are much, much smaller in population. So any changes in population may cause much greater district variation upon redistricting. And this was one of the reasons why there was a feeling that we didn't want to go through the Charter Review Committee. That was one of the reasons why the Charter Review Committee didn't want to go to 6 districts, because it would cause, it's a much more radical change to redistrict in a 6-district city when you only have a population of 120,000. San Jose has a population over 1 million, so they have 100,000 people in each district. And my recollection, having worked in San Jose, was that most of the redistricting didn't really affect very much any of the council members, because the districts were so big, the lines didn't get redrawn very much. So
the thing is, so the around 1,900 people is the deviation, maximum deviation allowed, because each of our district is going to be so tiny if we were to go to 6 different districts. Now, 1,900 people, if you talk about maybe 3 different new apartment complexes, that's 1,900 people already. So if we have one massive, let's say that Santa Clara Square, where the Whole Foods is, when everybody moves into that, it's going to completely change the population distribution, and we may have to redraw the district line. So if we split our tiny city into 6 districts, our district lines are going to be pretty unstable. So I think it'll make sense to think this through, and how we're going to do sequencing, making assumption that in 2020 we will have to do redistricting. So is this something that somebody can think about and come up with a recommendation?
we've been trying to make that case to the court, but the plaintiffs in the court don't seem to care about that.
Okay, but I mean, if the court comes back and tells us to do this, then we need to think about how we're going to handle it. So,
well, I'm not going to say that, but no, I think the answer is we're here to take public input and provide that input back to the court. What the court does with that, I can't tell you, because we're in an area that I've never seen before, nor do we have a roadmap for this kind of thing. So we're doing the best we can as a city. I'm trying to represent all of you as my fellow residents and the voters of Santa Clara to communicate your concerns back to the court and to the plaintiffs. And so we're just doing the best we can. But I can't answer that question. I understand the concerns that people have about going to 6 districts. That was not the direction that the Charter Review Committee wanted to go into, but this is the direction the court seems to be headed.
Okay, because my question has to do with what Rob was asking. Is court going to come back and tell us how to do the districting in 2021, 2031, et cetera? So
I would think that the court would not like to do that. The court would probably not want to get involved in that. That would be my speculation. But I can't guarantee that there won't be another group of plaintiffs that may try to involve the court in redistricting in 2022. I have no control over who might sue us under the California Voting Rights Act.
okay, well, thank you very much. Any other committee member have a question on this issue? All right, let's move on to Josefina Pulido.
I just have a few quick questions. One, in terms of the guidelines where it states that council members need to be residents of the area. Are we talking residents as live-in residents or people who own property? It should be somebody who is a resident, as we now have a city council member who is not a resident of the area, nor were we as voters aware that the person was going to move out of state. So that's one. And two, the University of Santa Clara, in which district would that fall under? And how are students' numbers taken into consideration in population, as when they're in school, it does blow up that district's population greatly, reducing the amount of housing, which would then cause problems, and how is it that the voters would be in that district?
Thank you for your question. Okay, yes, Dr. Gubale.
In all 3 draft plans, Santa Clara University itself, I believe, is in plans 1 and 2, it's in District 6, and in Plan 3, it's in District 5, I believe. When the census is taken, people get counted at their principal place of residence. So if it's an undergraduate student living in a dorm, probably the parents will count their children of college age, even though they're temporarily living here in Santa Clara. Of course, they probably can register and vote here if they have an address. So it's a kind of a complicated question, the question of what does resident mean. But that's my understanding in terms of what the census does and what voter registration involves.
So the location of property ownership is not what determines.
I don't know the answer to that part of the question.
I don't think the court is talking about changing our city charter with respect to requiring you to be a resident of the city, and residency is determined by what's known as domicile. So it's a bunch of factors, meaning that you have to live there. Obviously, ownership of property is not a determinant factor at all. It has to do with where you live, where you regularly sleep at night, who lives with you there, does your family live with you there? These are not determinative in and of themselves, but there's a series of factors: where you file your income tax return, where you register to vote. So if you're registered to vote in another state, then it's going to be an indication that you're not really a resident of this state. So the court's not talking about changing any of that. So we're still talking about you would have to be a resident of Santa Clara. And I think if they go to districts, if the court orders districts, then you would have to be a resident of the district in order to run and in order to vote for that council member in that district.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope that answered Ms. Polito's question. Let's move on to the next speaker, which is Rick Berton.
So I don't know if everybody's got one of these, but the down at the bottom in red is the URL for all those PowerPoint slides, and it's much easier than seeing it on a picture on a phone. The bill that talks about what we're doing here basically indicates that it's to make it easier for minority groups in California to prove their votes are being diluted and in at-large elections. And so one of my questions is going to be, who brought this lawsuit? And then it says it is inappropriate. Critics of the act argue that it is inappropriate. It inappropriately makes race a predominant factor in elections. So if we're changing that Plan 2 from Plan 1 because of an Asian community, that might be a red flag for the judge. I really feel, I feel like myself, having lived here for 30 years and owning a home, that if people are renting, which I rented a lot too. I rented before I bought a house, but they don't have the same interests as people who have a lot of money and value invested in their property. So if we're deciding city council members on a lot of people who don't have that much invested, then things like having all these front-facing apartments on El Camino and moving our shopping centers into other places is not going to be able to be done much with. So I don't know. That just seems like it's a wrong way to go. I'm kind of radical in certain ways. So one of the solutions, well, first of all, we need to make sure that any people that are even candidates for our city council members are vetted very well, or we're going to get ourselves into the same situation we have experienced recently, as far as not living here or other stuff. And so the city has the option of either giving this back to the judge and trying to get some kind of ruling that we would agree with or that would help the citizens, or settling. And there were 3 cases that this happened with. 2 of them settled, and when you settle, you end up having to pay the defendant's attorney's fees, which were $3 million in one case and $10,000 in another. The 3rd case, they tried to fight it, so to speak, and they lost, but there was a...
Okay, thank you very much.
Basically, the penalty that was the payment for the attorneys was a couple of $1 million, and it got reduced to like
Okay, thank you. So I think Mr. Bertel brought up the issue, are the candidates going to be vetted in terms of whether they actually are eligible to run from their specific districts?
The voters do the vetting. I mean, they have to come, we check the residency and we check whether they're registered voters, but they just give us their residency and we ask for proof of residency, but that's not necessarily a complete story as to domicile. We don't ask, for example, give us your tax returns, and we don't do a complete and thorough analysis. Typically that kind of thing comes out in a campaign if someone is actually living somewhere else. The council member that everyone's talking about right now is someone who clearly was a resident of Santa Clara and has purchased a home in another state. He still has a residence here in Santa Clara, and apparently he is still a registered voter in Santa Clara County. So, you know, in situations like that, we look through a bunch of attorney general opinions, and there's there's a series of factors that you determine whether someone has actually moved out of the city or not. And it's not for us to make that determination. It would be for someone who's challenging his residency to make that determination.
Okay, thank you
It's,
very
it's
much.
a very complicated process that the city attorney doesn't have control over.
I see. Thank you, thank you. Oh, okay, yes, that's right. So can you tell us a little bit about the plaintiff of this lawsuit?
I'm going by what's alleged in the complaint in the lawsuit. So let me put my glasses on. So there is a single plaintiff, and her name is LaDonna Yamori Kaku.
And that's all we know, the name, and that's it?
Well, hold on. Well, she's the named plaintiff. Let me see if it was amended. Let's see. Yes, I have it. I have it here. It's apparently the complaint was amended. So it's LaDonna Yamori Kaku, Wesley Kazuo Mukiyama, Umar Kamal, Michael Kaku, and Herminio Hernando. And I'm assuming that they're all residents of Santa Clara.
Okay, thank you. So I see Wes Mukoyama filling out the speaker card, so maybe this is a great time to ask Wes Mukoyama to come to the podium.
Hi, my name is Wes Mukoyama. I'm a resident. I've lived at my residence for 44 years in Santa Clara. I am indeed a native-born American. My father came from Japan. My mother's from Hawaii. So I consider myself a viable Santa Clara resident. I was the original plaintiff in 2011 when we saw this. We haven't seen a person of color since 1952, and our population has grown. I would like to differ with the first speaker here that when someone is voted for, he must consider the total population, not just the voters, because even if you are not a citizen, you pay your taxes, you live in this district, you must be considered by the candidate who is up for vote. I do not plan to vote, be a candidate at all, so I just wanted to know that. But I would like to remind you that we won the suit. We sued and we won. And the judge has looked at polarized voting, and polarized voting was a reason that he came in our favor. We have to take a look at that. Secondly, we defeated Measure A. Measure A had the ranked choice voting, and we defeated that as well as a two-district voting. So, but I want you to know something that may change this whole talking. I, as an individual, is in favor of 7 districts where the mayor is not voted at large, that the council has rotating. So I'm in favor of 7 districts. That may change your whole thinking. I know I may be in an audience which is more biased for Measure A, but I must say that we came out victorious, and I want you to know that we're going to try our best to compromise with the city, but we have leverage here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do committee members have any questions? No. Okay, if Mr. Mukoyama plans to stay and if other members of the public have a question, then I will try to direct those questions. But please, yes, Peggy, what is your question? To Mr. Mukoyama, excuse me, for Mr. Mukoyama, is your question directed to Mr. Mukoyama? Is your question directed to Mr. Mukoyama? Okay, then let's wait until your turn to speak then. Okay, then let's wait until your turn to speak. Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, it's really not within Robert's Rules of Order to have one member of the audience direct a question to another member of the audience.
Okay.
If they're free to speak with each other outside
Sure.
of the public hearing.
Sure. I understand. Thank you. I will, when members of the public has any questions to a plaintiff who happens to be the member of the public, then I will try to direct the question to Mr. Mukoyama. All right, thank you. Let's move on to Keith Adams.
Good evening. We're missing the point about 6 districts. Fine, I'm all for the 6 because I do believe that a council member should be representing a definite district. And each one, I don't like this system we have now where we have like a tie vote all the time and the mayor being the brake on it. But what we're forgetting about is a district, you don't have to change them at all. Once you set it up, they stay the same. The people will flow in and out. I've been here over 50 years in this city as a homeowner, and we have watched the whole neighborhoods change over and over. We've watched schools be taken away, and we've had to fight to keep schools and playgrounds, and now they're looking for those playgrounds. We still have them, some of them. We've lost others, but we need to have an area. I want a district. I'm in a really good district. We seem to get everything we want. But if you go over and on Lafayette and around there, you can hardly get down the streets when the poor people, I say poor, I don't mean poor in money. I mean the difficulties that they have trying to find a parking place. The streets are so narrow. But people like that, they need a representative, someone they can go to and say, hey, I'll just say Pat Coaster, say, Pat, why don't I need to see you? And then you talk to him, just like you can't get around here and talk to the mayor and other people, council members at will. You've got to be somebody. But if you've got that person who lives in your town area, they know about the damn pothole down the road. They know about the guy who's got his car parked on his driveway. Or they've got a little camper in front of the house all the time and someone's living in it. Or there's people defecating on the way to the football games. I mean, you need all these things. You need a representative who will be just for you. And as for this very gentleman, we should be honored to have him here. But, and forgive me, I don't even know your name. I may be before I forget these things. But they always say since 1952, it all started with the H1B or 1BH, whatever it was, in what, 1990 or 2000. Our population just zoomed after that. We used to have young men lined up in the street, walking around 15 in a crowd at first. Now it's all moved out now. My neighborhood's changed. I've been called, I've got the name of that now, but I've been called a racist here in the committee meetings, the city council meetings. And I'm not. I have neighbors that I help and assist when they come in. We've got them all from India, China, even Nepal. So anyway, we need someone who can look after my streets and pave them when we want them.
Thank you for the input. Okay, Charles said yes.
Hi, my name is Charles Sedlacek. I've owned a house here since 1993.
Can you speak into
Oops,
the?
sorry, they moved to the left here. The thing is, I agree that we have a problem here, but I think that our solution might be different. And that's one of the things that when you take a look at the ethics page for Santa Clara City, the one thing that they don't seem to be following is developing a number of good options for an action. And one of the things that I also see, being here since 1993, is these names up here I've seen time and time again. We're supposed to have term limits. If I go to the webpage, what I see is Lisa Gilmore is on her first round as being mayor. She's been mayor before. Pat Mahan has been here how many years? And she's on her first term as city council member. See, the problem is we have the same people running over and over again. And what does that give for other people to get into these offices? So that, I don't think districting will help, because what we're addressing is breaking up and losing. Again, I agree in one way with you, but I disagree with another way, because right now 6 people are representing me because I'm a voter in Santa Clara. When you go to districting, only a couple people will now represent me. See, we're limiting our choices. So again, I know you're the demographer, and when the only tool you have is a hammer, everything's a nail. So you see everything as a district. And I think that Santa Clara is a wonderful community, and I don't think we should break it up into pieces.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next speaker is Paul Kreger.
My name is Paul Krieger. I've been a resident of Santa Clara for about 48 years now.
Would you like to bend the, oh.
Is that better?
Much better, thank you.
Okay, my name is Paul Krieger. I've been resident of Santa Clara for about 48 years. And I have 3 questions. The first one is, I have difficulty, and I'm sure others do, about reconciling voting questions with local constraints on who can vote. For example, we take tons of census data, okay? And now perhaps, I think like in Santa Clara, the charter can tell you who can vote. And one of the things, you have to be a registered voter, I believe. So we're creating census we're creating data about the creating districts. And so in creating districts, we end up using census data as one of the starting points. But now when it comes down to who gets to vote, people who are not registered voters can't vote. So therefore, that group of people are out of the picture when it comes to helping guide a city in its management. And since you asked all the questions in a row, I guess, the American Community Survey of 2012 to 16, can you say just a little bit more about that? Who authorized it? What made it happen, and why did it happen? And the last one is when you were doing the districting work that you've done, this is not a criticism now, but it seems like the choices ended up, and because of the numbers and that sort of thing, sort of horizontally across the city from Stevens Creek this way. Did the where there was the possibility of what's in what area done vertically also through the city.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let's go through those questions one by one. Non-registered voters and residents, I think Mr. Mukoyama talked about this a little bit, but maybe we can talk about it again.
My understanding of the legal theory behind using total population as the basis for balancing election districts rather than eligible voters, registered actual voters, is that everyone is entitled to be represented under the Equal Protections Clause of the Constitution or something like that. Are you a lawyer? I just said it's my understanding, sir. Thank you. And children are entitled to be represented. So are people who are not citizens.
I would like to ask members of the public to refrain from speaking out of turn, please. Thank you. Please, Dr. Gobele, if you could continue. Thank you.
So my understanding, limited as it is by my education in demography, is that a reason behind using total population to balance election districts comes from the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution, equal representation under the law. And in districting, it's my understanding that the courts have required that we balance total populations of districts in order to assess deviation of plans. Now, congressional districts have to be almost exactly equal in total population, but local jurisdictions like this can have deviations of 10% and in some cases more, and often less. But the second issue is how to comply with the Federal Voting Rights Act, which, as I understand it with my limited education, is intended to give members of groups that were historically discriminated against when it came to the voting booth be allowed to have the opportunity to vote and to elect representatives of their choice. And that's why we look at American Community Survey data, not just census data, which is used for the population balance question, but we look at American Community Survey to test districting plans to see whether this plan or that one would provide a particular protected group or combined number of protected groups the opportunity to elect representatives of their choice as measured by citizen voting age population. Now, there's nothing in the US Census that counts people who are citizens and of voting age, and a move to include that on 2020 census, I think, has pretty much gone by the wayside, but it may appear again. But in any event, we have to use sample surveys to get estimates of citizen voting age population in order to compare districting plans and to evaluate them in terms of Federal Voting Rights Act requirements. The American Community Survey is a rolling survey that started being taken in the early 1990s to replace the long form of the US Census, which was also a sample survey. The American Community Survey asks respondents, and they're very small sample sizes nationwide and even smaller samples locally, hence there are large margins of error, whether people are citizens, how old they are, and those data are released in a special tabulation of American Community Survey data. The American Community Survey was designed by the U.S. Census Bureau. I believe it's mandated by Congress or endorsed by Congress. So it's our representatives who directly or indirectly have said that we measure all kinds of useful things with the survey data. So my understanding is that as a demographer, I need to look at two kinds of things. One is population balance to satisfy what I understand to be one set of legal requirements as the courts are interpreting them right now, to my limited extent of knowing what those are. And on the other hand, I need to look at the characteristics of various proposed plans in terms of members of groups protected under the Federal Voting Rights Act and what shares of the population they are. And the difference between eligible to vote, registered to vote, and actually voting, of course, are significant. But I think my understanding is that people who are citizens of voting age are eligible to register, but no one forces them or us to register. And people who are registered to vote don't actually vote in many cases. They don't want to, or they just don't choose to. So some of this is a matter of choice. People have a choice whether to become citizens. People have a choice whether to register and whether to vote. But as I understand it, the way to measure compliance with Federal Voting Rights Act requirements as interpreted by the courts is to use the 51% or 50% plus one share of the estimated citizen voting age population of an individual election district.
Thank you. And I guess the last question was the district looked horizontal shape rather than vertical shape?
Yes. In the round of two-district design, we did look at north-south, two north-south districts, or diagonal north, east-southwest, or northwest-southeast districts, and people tended to favor the ones that were north and south, not east and west. But if I look at the pieces here, they do follow major arterials, and the pieces map is designed to follow the way the roads are laid out in the city. And maybe they look predominantly east-west, but I don't know. It seems to me that we have a variety of shapes here.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next speaker is Ellen Ratner. No, I'm sorry. Let's go to Ms. Ratner.
I'm Ellen Ratner. I live in Santa Clara off of Kiley Boulevard. I've lived here many years. I'm a voter, and I get involved in the city council and the state agendas and come to meetings when necessary. I was not informed, I felt, adequately about what was going on, why we were making the changes, and what the suit was about. And I think a lot of people who are residents are not informed. And we got a letter like 2 days ago saying there was this meeting to give input, and now you want input like tomorrow. And the plans that I've heard tonight, none of them I like. I was happy with the way it was. And my understanding, the person who is unhappy has to do with polarization, that not representative of the diversity in Santa Clara is happening. And the question is, why is that? And my understanding is they don't rotate mayors, and when I lived in Oregon, they did. It wasn't, and people were not on the city council many years. It was a turnover, and so other people got input, so it changed over time. And I think what's important is not to rush this through and see whether the court will give you more time to get more input from the community, not worry about a suit, because I think what I heard from the person who's unhappy is he likes it the way it is. It's just the people that are making up of the city council isn't representing the people in Santa Clara, and I think we need to address that. And why is that happening? And another question is the idea about voting. If we change the districts in one district, like number 6, nobody is a registered voter in that district. Nobody votes. They're not going to get a representative to represent them on the city council. So that defeats the whole purpose. You want a representative of the areas. So I think you need to take into account the number of people voting in certain districts when you're doing the demarcation of the various districts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay. So would the staff like to comment on the issues of outreach and whether if there's any chance that the court will give us time to solicit more input more widely from our voters? And firstly, why aren't our demography reflected in the council makeup? And I guess, the last question has already been addressed. Why are we not looking at the registered voters as opposed to the population? I think that question has been addressed several times. Okay, so.
We certainly have tried to communicate the view of the last speaker to the court, but the court feels constrained by its own ruling to operate on this timeline. So we will again pass on the comments to the extent that we can that are expressed tonight, but it does not appear that the court will extend any further time for public input because the court has set a trial date of July 18th. On the issue of why does the council look the way it does, the speaker expressed issues about term limits. The previous Charter Review Committee came up with a term limit provision in the charter, which is now in the charter with real teeth, and that was passed by an overwhelming majority of Santa Clara. So I think that the issue of people coming back, people that have been on the council repeatedly coming back, has been addressed from a charter standpoint in terms of term limits. And so I don't think the court is not looking at any kind of term limit issue. I think that the charter has already been amended to have real term limits in it.
And since we're on the topic, can you describe again about the outreach efforts that the city is making to work with the time limits that the court has imposed and yet to solicit?
We're doing the absolute best we can. I mean, we were given an extremely short time frame here to set up these meetings, to get the notices out, to print up the information that we could.
I'm not saying you're not doing your best,
Yeah.
but maybe you can just go over the things that you're doing, because I think they were outlined in the court rule, the order from the court, but maybe you can just go over them quickly.
I mean, similar to what we did last time, we've done all of our social media push. We have mailers that have gone out. We sent those to the printer last week, right when we found out. We did a quick postcard and sent it out to all residents of Santa Clara.
And I got it.
You got it? Good. So, and then our online posting, I mean, everything that we've traditionally done and the online tools that we have, the non-traditional ways. So we are doing our best to get the word out. It was a very quick turnaround, and I'm happy with the turnout actually today. I was, the day before a holiday, I was a little concerned, but.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. Ellen Ratner. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Ellen, you just spoke. Okay, I'm confused. David Carey?
Thank you, committee members, and thank you for agreeing to serve here on short notice. I wanted to address a few things here from kind of a special perspective, in that I have been attending the court hearings on this lawsuit since the liability phase of the trial in April, and including all the case management conferences that have been held since then. And so, as far as I know, I'm outside of the legal teams that have been in court. I'm the only person in the public who has been there to all of those hearings. First of all, I'd like to point out that a real key point about this process is that this city was found liable for having illegal elections since 2002 under the California Voting Rights Act. And the judge has made it clear that with that liability ruling, that continuing with the status quo for this November's council elections would expose the elections to being canceled, because if there are no changes. In the city attorney's description at the start of this meeting, there was no acknowledgement that the city's elections since 2002 had been found to be conducted using in a manner that was illegal under state law. And so that need for change is just really important. The other thing I'd like to say is that the judge is very intent on having some kind of remedy in place for this council for the November elections. And in court, both sides and the judge have talked about the possibility of just an interim solution because they recognize in the short amount of time it's difficult to put together a full process for coming up with a complete solution. And so I'd really encourage you to think about what is an appropriate plan to recommend specifically for the November election. Thinking a little bit ahead, but also keeping in mind that after this November's elections in 2020, there are other options that are likely to become available that expand what is possible. You know, for example, the ability for the city to do STV, RCV for council elections. I'll also just mention that so far, the only remedy that the city has advanced in court is a remedy involving only 2 districts with 3 council members being elected from each district, but only using the methods that are available in the elections code for that, which are also, like the current system, are exclusionary and do not produce representative results. By design, they are exclusionary in their results. And so they are not effective remedies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Steve Chesson. Okay, so while we set that up, let's call somebody else. Okay, John McLemore.
I'm John McLemore. I'm a former city councilman here, and by coincidence, I was with the group that opposed Measure A. I'm glad that we won the election, but now we are in that next step, and as everyone tries to understand what has to happen, I know that the city has to go through their best efforts to respond to what the judge has dictated. We've gone over a lot of basic American Government 101 here tonight. Once you become familiar with it, you'll understand that it's, in general, the same all across the United States. The congressional delegates from California is based upon the total population as Texas, New York, so everyone gets a fair share in the House of Representatives. And then each state, despite the population, gets 2 senators. Enough said on that. So the city attorney has talked about the best efforts of trying to go forward with this condensed timeline, and that condensed timeline is really a reality, especially since the judge just came back today and condensed it again by several days. So the issue of 6 districts versus 7 districts, because Wes earlier said that he hopes that 7 districts is reviewed also. If we really have a best effort, we should be looking at a 7th district also. And the reason behind that would be that our mayor is not a special, has special responsibilities that make her a strong mayor as larger cities have. So I just say if we are having a best effort, we should create a one plan with 7 to be able to show that we've tried to do that even though it's in this condensed time frame. So my one question would be of the doctor, how long would it take to create one more option showing that 7th. I know that the city does not prefer 7 options. They want the mayor to be elected. And when I say the city, I mean the city government. But where 6 is preferred, the 7th is the least desired. And I see no reason why we couldn't go and show that to the judge with the comments. We've created several options with 6 for you, and we've created one option for 7. The city doesn't prefer that, but as our best efforts, we've gone along and added that one element. So I had the question is to her on how long would it take to come up with that additional option. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go to that question, ask that question to Dr. Gogolay, I'd like to ask the staff, is it true that, and thank you, Mr. McLemore. Is it true that there's a preference for 6 districts versus 7? And what is the city's impression of what the court's preference is?
The court itself has not expressed a preference. And I believe there are substantial legal arguments as to why 7 would not be something the court would order. The principle being our charter does not have a mechanism by which the other council members could elect a mayor. That the charter itself says the mayor is elected by the people. So if the judge were to amend the charter in his order, I think there would be some problems with that. It's also not something I think that's supported necessarily by the California Voting Rights Act. And so I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that the judge would in any case, impose a 7-district solution.
Okay, thank you. And what was I going to ask? This is a more basic question that I had when this committee was reconvened. So the court can order the city to supersede its charter, because going to 6th district is superseding its charter, is it not?
The plaintiffs are maintaining that. And the judge seems to believe that he has some power to do that with regard to imposing a 6th. The 6 districts do not exist in our charter. So by imposing a 6th district election system, he obviously believes that he can supersede our charter. It's a complicated legal issue under Palmdale, but it's not a legal issue that's been answered by the California Supreme Court. I prefer not to go into all the different theories behind it, but we're in a situation where the court appears to believe that it can at least amend the charter to the extent that it can impose a 6th district solution, even though our charter has not been amended to allow for that. The court has not ruled that it believes it can impose a 7-district solution.
So I don't want to dwell on this too much, but could somebody else in the city sue the city, come back and sue the city that, hey, going to 6th district is a violation of our charter? Is that a potential
Well,
scenario?
someone could certainly intervene in the lawsuit, but that's not something that has happened yet.
I see.
I mean, we, the city, are arguing that to the judge, and we have been arguing it to the judge. Okay. But the judge does not appear to be inclined to accept our argument.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the quick question to Dr. Gobelet. So, that spreadsheet is much more flexible than before. So can you accommodate 7 districts and do all the calculations analysis just as easily as the way, the 6 districts that you have set up currently?
It's not set up to do 7 districts. It would take some time to change the automatic calculators Excel file to do 7 districts, but I could do a 7-district plan by combining city census blocks, yes, but it would take time to do it because I could spend my day tomorrow working on that if you so direct me.
I'm not suggesting one way or the other.
In any case, to do a decent plan, you really needs to take a lot of time and thought. I think I might have to make some smaller pieces in order to do it, or just go back to the individual city blocks, which is fine as well. But it does take time to experiment with this idea and that idea. what would be better than what else in terms of everything that I know. I'm just a technician doing this stuff to try to help people like the city, and I'm always curious to see how I would go about doing something and what the results would be. So I'm open to doing that, should you so direct.
Okay, thank you very much. I myself will leave it at that unless my fellow committee members have any other inputs. Okay, let's leave it at that for now. All right, next person is Anthony Becker. Oh yeah, are we ready to help Mr. Chesson with the presentation? Okay, all right, let's go to Mr. Chesson.
And after, I'll also speak to slide 16 and 10. Let's see if this works. No, this isn't a clicker, this is a pointer. It's a pointer, great. Okay, thank you. My name is Steve Chesson. I'm president of Californians for Electoral Reform, and I was also a strong supporter of Measure A. The plaintiffs do say in their court filing that they're going to be monitoring the comments made at this hearing, and I see that one of the plaintiffs is here, and earlier I did see one of the attorneys. I don't know where the attorney went, but it's good that they're here. This is Plan 1. In District 1, 26% of the city's Asian American population lives in District 1. And since District 1 has a CVAP, a citizen voting age population of 51%, theoretically they would be able to elect someone of their choice. But what about the other 74% of the Asian Americans who live in the rest of the city? They have no opportunity to elect a person of their, a candidate of their choice. And the plaintiffs themselves, 3 of the plaintiffs live in this area, one of the plaintiffs lives down here, and Mr. Mukayama himself lives over in this area and wouldn't be able to elect a candidate of their choice. Can we go to page 16, please? This is similar, except that now in this district, only 24% of the city's Asian Americans live in that district, and you've got 76 that live in an area where they can't elect anybody. Please go to slide 10. Now, I don't envy the task that you have, because you've got to decide which Asian Americans, in either Plan 1 or Plan 2, you've got all of these Asian Americans living in that district. But you've got to decide, do these Asian Americans get to live in a district where they can elect someone of their choice? Or do these Asian Americans get to live in a district where they can elect someone of their choice? And what about all the Asian Americans who live in the rest of the city? Now, I was a strong supporter of Measure A, and Measure A would have given every Asian American in the city the opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice, but the plaintiffs didn't want that, and they conducted a vigorous and successful campaign to defeat Measure A, and I congratulate them on their success. I do want to see what the plaintiff's map looks like, and I hope that you, and I would request that when you have the meeting next week, that you include in the presentation the plaintiff's map that they will be filing with the court later this week. Is there anything else I was going to say? Yeah, Santa Clara is not the same as Menlo Park. Menlo Park was faced with a threat of a civil rights, California voting rights lawsuit, and in Menlo Park, in the majority-minority district, 72% of Menlo Park's Hispanic population lived in that district. So it made sense to go to a single-member district for them. And in that same district, 67%, 2/3 of Menlo Park's African-American population lived in that district. But you do not have that situation in Santa Clara. And this yet is what the plaintiffs want. But they won, they defeated Measure A, and so this is what the city has to live with. I hope that they will reconsider their position and realize that a single-member district solution, maybe it works for 2018, but in 2020, when we can have single transferable vote, I hope that the plaintiffs will reconsider their position. And I would like to request that you include the plaintiff's map in the materials that you present next week.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
What is the plaintiff's map? Oh, no, I'm not asking you. No, I'm not asking you, sir. I'm asking our staff.
Sure.
The court we asked the plaintiffs to bring a map to this meeting, but they haven't done that. Okay. But they're supposed to submit a map to the court on Friday. Okay. So if we have a copy of it, we'll be happy to bring it to the meeting next week.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, final card I have is Anthony Becker.
Good evening. My name is Anthony Becker. I'm Planning Commissioner and former 2016 City Council candidate. In 2016, you can go in the records and find it. I was the only candidate in the race that was actually supporting multiple districts, which was 6 districts at the time. The thing is that we've heard this many times. There's boroughs, precincts, parishes. It's the same thing, districts. We divide it up more and more. It's direct democracy. Yet I do still have the same question that Mr. McElmore had and many others do, is the 7-district option. I'm a fan of the 6-district option, but there is the possibility that the judge is asking us for that. The CVRA trumps the city charter, and the judge has said that. Also, at the same time, our mayor used to be appointed, and it was now turned to an election. The city charter was amended to do that. The same thing could be done again now. That was the same administration that got rid of our downtown, 50 years ago. To the person who said about renters that they don't have a say, I'm a renter. I was a homeowner. I'm not a homeowner. My family was a homeowner, but I'm a renter. So to me, I think that's pretty insulting that renters don't have any say here, because we do, because I'm fighting for my city. That's why I'm here at 8:30 at night. I keep doing it as much as I can. But this comes down to direct democracy. It's about defeating elitism. It's about moving forward and creating more of an effective city council by keeping people that you know in your districts. It's terming people out pretty much. It's giving the single mother in your neighborhood a chance to lead you. It's giving maybe the college student that's living in your neighborhood that wants to make a change, or the millennial that wants to make a change. It's all about direct democracy, and it's about putting minorities in there. It's about putting people of lower class in there, including people who don't own a home, which, look at the city council seats. How many up there own a home? How many are renters? Yes, Mr. Cole said he is a so-called renter, but it still is kind of a slap in the face to me that I'm a renter, so I don't have a say. I don't think so. But anyways, my last point is that I feel that anyone involved in this process, in creating any district lines, in creating anything within this election process to create these districts, they should not be allowed to run in any city council races, period. Because that, folks, I call gerrymandering. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming and giving us your input. Just to be clear, each member of this committee had to sign a pledge to not run for an office for 5 years. Oh yeah, waiver to not run for 5 years. Okay, we have more speakers. Dr. Gobale. Oh, we have more. Oh, are you speaking? Oh, okay. Oh, thank you. Okay. All right, next speaker is Hossam Hagag.
Hossam Hagag here. So I think the city attorney has already made very clear to us that, and when you read the court proceedings and the court order, that the judge during the remedy phase has not yet indicated whether or not they were going to go to 6 districts or 7 districts, and quite frankly, they haven't indicated at all what solution they plan to, what solution the judge plans to impose. So what I would like to request of the committee, and I know this is a Herculean effort to be able to do this, is for the city to, or for the city and the districting committee to actually recommend several different proposals, not just several different 6-district maps, but I would actually ask that the committee submit a potential remedy where the city goes at large, so no districts with ranked choice voting in 2020 as a potential remedy. I would also like to ask that the districting committee propose 2 districts with 3 council members each with ranked choice voting to start in 2020. I would also like to ask that the districting committee propose a district map that has 3 districts with 2 council members each using ranked choice voting to start in 2020, in addition to the 6 district map that the districting committee plans to recommend with instant runoff voting to start in 2020. The reason is, once again, the judge has not indicated at all what remedy he plans to use for the trial. I'm certain that the judge, when he looks at the data and understands the demographics and how Santa Clara is a very well integrated city, and as Dr. Gobele testified in front of the city council, that while she has done this for many, many years, she seems to believe, and I don't mean to put words in her mouth, but from when she testified in front of city council, that the 3 council member per district, 2 district plan with ranked choice voting would give minorities and underrepresented classes or protected classes a better opportunity at electing members of their choice than single member districts. And I would advise the committee and the city to not only pigeonhole themselves with single member districts with regards to the recommendation to the judge, but to look at all of the options as a holistic package, which would include, like I said, a 2 district solution, a 3 district solution, and the 6 district solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Gobele.
My recollection of what I said before the city council was that although I've not had experience with the ranked choice voting system in the past, that it seems to me that once I started to understand it, it seemed to have the potential to give members of the protected groups the opportunity to elect representatives of their choice. So I didn't mean to say it was a guarantee, but that rather it seemed to me that numerically speaking or arithmetically speaking, it makes sense to me now that I think I understand what the proposal was. In any event, that's what I believe I said. I don't know if I'm right about that belief, but that's what I said, I think.
Thank you. So does the city attorney have comments about proposing other types of solutions to the court at this point juncture in our...
The only comment I would make is that the court appears uniquely focused on this November's election. So I think that other solutions that would look towards 2020 would not be something that the court would look at through this phase of the proceedings.
Okay, so we're solely focused on this November.
I think the court appears to be very much focused on what happens in November and not really prepared to look at what happens in 2020.
Okay, understand. Thank you very much. Do other members of the committee have any questions or comments on this issue? Yes, Ms. Estrada.
Thank you. I want to thank the public for all their input tonight. I'm sure we're going to be extremely...
We're not done yet.
Oh, go back. I'll refer you back to the chair.
Okay, thank you. All right. Yes, we don't need a card actually. It's just there to help us.
Hello, my name is Kevin Park, and I also went to the CMC meetings, all the meetings that I could after the decision that the city was found in violation and after the elections. And I'll say that one of the reasons that we have this compressed schedule is that the judge is focused on us having elections in November. Otherwise, the judge can say, we want to not have elections in November, and you can take as much time as you want. Judge also said that what we do in 2018 may be very different from what we do in 2020. And the other big key point was the CVRA, the California Voting Rights Act, trumps charter city powers. I think that this is very important. The judge also asked the plaintiffs for a 6-district and a 7-district map because he wants options. It hasn't been decided, but I think that it would be remiss for the judge to ask the plaintiff to have a 6- and 7-district map and for us not to provide a 6- and 7-district map. The point of the court order is remediation because the city was found to be in violation of the California Voting Rights Act. It is not about how easy or convenient or cheap the options are. It's about trying to be fair. It's about trying to address the violations now and in the future. I have no problem with having to redraw the lines in 2021 after the latest census data at that time. I have no problem with that, and I think that we should consider and not try to think in the future and prevent this. While it is true that there is some affinity for ethnic groups to vote within that ethnic group, I'm not one to believe that. I don't do that myself, but it's not a rule. And it's not a rule, and we can look at the chair, who is a minority person, and the chair of this committee is the one minority person that campaigned actively against every other minority candidate in favor of the sitting council. And that may be one reason why she's the chair of this committee. We need to consider these kinds of things. I don't ask for people to vote for me for any other reason than you think I am the best candidate to represent you. And I think this is very important. It's not about race or understanding that the city is well integrated. It's about representation, not just of minorities, but also of neighborhoods. Right? The bigger issue is that we have no representations in our area, in our way of thinking, right? Which is perhaps why the majority of all the new high-density housing is going up in our neighborhoods, right? And El Camino is becoming a canyon of apartments. I mean, I think that we have to consider that the representation that the neighborhoods are getting is not what we have on city council, and this is one of the things that we need to look at. I think it's very, very telling going to the court hearing what the judge has to say yourself, rather than hear what the interpretations are, because there is a lot said at these meetings, and there's a lot being missed at these summarizations. The judge, I don't know what the judge is going to do. I don't know what the plaintiffs are going to do. I don't know what the defendants are going to do, but we spent a lot of time because the city decided to appeal rather than say, we were at fault. Let's move on with remediation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Since this speaker spoke about my support of, I believe, Councilmember Teresa O'Neill, I like to rebut because I think it has to do with the impression that this committee gives on its impartiality. It is not true that Teresa O'Neill was the only candidate that I supported. I supported Mr. Raj Chahal as well. I helped him with his campaign and I contributed to his campaign. So it is categorically untrue that I actively campaigned against other minority members. So firstly, I'd like to make that clear. And I did not support Teresa O'Neill because she is a white person. I believe that she is a great person of integrity who has the best interest of city at his heart, and that's why I campaigned for her, donated to her campaign. And if there are other, excuse me, you're no longer, please do not speak out of turn. Please do not speak out of turn. There were many other white candidates that I did not support. So I guess I'll leave it at that. Okay, so does the staff have any comments on the comments that were made just now?
Only that people should not speak out of order.
Okay, thank you. I agree 100%. Okay, is there any other member of the public who would like to speak? Okay, so if you do, please come up. Oh, you've already spoken, sir. Okay, all right, yes. One question, please.
Thank you, Bernd Steves again, and I will honor my promise to keep it to just one point. We've all been talking about having different districts, and it seems to have been tacitly or explicitly assumed that the candidate elected out of that district must under all circumstances, be a resident in that district. Why? Why should I not have the right, if I think the best person for my district, if we are going down to districts, and I prefer at-large elections, but if we're going to have that, why should I not decide that the best person to represent my district is somebody who happens to live in the neighboring district? We are one city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, any other member of the public? Okay, do we have a motion to close public hearing?
I make.
I would like to say one thing. One more public. I humbly would like to say that the people of the city voted down Measure A, 2 districts, and ranked choice voting. That's all I have to say. And to propose that to the judge, to me, is outrageous.
Thank you. Any other member of the public? All right, motion to close public hearing?
Make the motion to close public hearing.
Oh, I wanted to amend that motion to say I'd like to close this meeting in memory of Larry Marsali.
We're just closing the public hearing.
Okay, sorry. Public hearing.
Do we have a second?
Yes, second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Committee member Ricosa.
Okay, I make a motion to.
No, I mean, do you support the motion?
Oh, yeah, I voted yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the public hearing is closed. Let me look at the agenda again. All right, so the next item on the agenda is adjournment, but would the committee members like to make any comments? Committee member Estrada.
Thank you. I want to thank the public this evening for all their input. I can tell you personally myself, and I'm sure the rest of the committee members are going to be extremely busy tomorrow and Thursday until we meet again at 4:30. So again, thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Okay, any more inputs from the staff? Yes, Dr. Gobale.
Any guidance you could provide in terms of what you'd like me to do that would be new in time for Thursday's meeting would be appreciated. And I've already said that if you want to use the Excel file to create other district scenarios, you can summarize the scenario by just copying the district assignments of the pieces, pieces 1 through 36 with the assignments in each district, a 2-column table. Give that to me, that I can use that to recreate your plan.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I have a comment too. I really like to thank the staff for working with the court and getting this done in time. I can see that this has been a huge strain on everybody involved. So I really want to thank you to try to get us through this proceeding, and and for having convened this committee and to get everything prepared. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
Well, I had some comments first. I didn't get a chance. First of all, I wanted to comment that one of the factors that contributed to Measure A failing was ranked choice voting and the difficulty of the public in general to understand what it was. So the fact that both things were bound together was the thing. So we can't assume that Measure A failing was just a repudiation of the 2-district method. It was the fact that it was also bound with that. Again, that's my personal opinion, but it bears out in some of my conversations with people.
I think that's a really excellent point. Thank you. Yep. Okay. Do we have? I believe that Commissioner Ricosa, committee member Ricosa has a dedication, and perhaps with a motion to close this.
Yes, I make a motion to adjourn in the memory of Larry Marsali, a former mayor of the city who passed away yesterday.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you very much for coming to this meeting, and hope to see you on Thursday.